after the great affront of the rebuffed dinner invitations, the Archers, Newland's mother and Newland himself, go to visit the Vanderlatens, the absolute top of the social pyramid that Mrs. Archer has laid out. They are an old, crepuscular couple, absolutely faded, and they seem to be always on the verge of dying, quite frankly. The impression is of very, very delicate. They're barely there anymore. We're told that they only come to New York occasionally. They spend most of their time in their country estate, or perhaps an ancestral estate back in Europe or England, or I guess the Netherlands. I'm not sure. But they are barely there necessarily. The idea is that they're very faded. They're very pale. Everything seems to be otherworldly at this point. They're not really present. So their command of the social structure is problematic, to be sure. They're not really anywhere. So why should they have such sway? But it is to this authority that Newland and his mom appeal. They go and they lay out the case, and they describe exactly what happened. And they're essentially pitching that, okay, you guys need to weigh in on this because this was an affront to family. Countess Olenska is a cousin. Countess Olenska is not nobody. So for her to be stood up like this is a great affront. And so this is a challenge to the way things are supposed to be. This is breaking the rules. And these people who refuse to come to a dinner party to meet the Countess, they need to be held accountable. And well, these older people have to listen to this, and they're nodding along, and oh yeah, and they kind of agree with one another ultimately. But again, it's a very bloodless exchange that we see playing out. And for this, Newland is presented with another image of marriage in this society that is less than inspiring for a young man, I suppose. Wharton writes, she and Mr. Vanderleiten were so exactly alike that Archer often wondered how, after 40 years of the closest conjugality, two such merged identities ever separated themselves enough for anything as controversial as a talking over. This is to Mrs. Vanderleiden's response that she would have to go talk over the matter with her husband. And just this sense that, well, how is this? What is inspiring about this vision of marriage? They've been together for 40 years. They are an old and venerated couple, but they seem to be the same person. There doesn't seem to be any distinction between them, and there's absolutely no passion at all in them. They are completely drained of it within this very uninspiring social hierarchy that they are sitting atop. But the couple come up with a solution. They are, I don't want to say passionate in their response, but they are offended that this infraction of familial respect, this infraction of the way things are, of the hierarchy of family, that this should go unnoticed, that they need to correct the matter. So they come up with a plan to host a party of their own. They have a cousin visiting who is a duke, and they were planning a gala event of their own, a reception for him, and now they decide to very pointedly invite the Countess Olenska, and this would be the entry for her into respectable society again, so to speak. This would be effectively giving their blessing to the Countess. And that's chapter 7. And then chapter 8 is the party itself. The party is very lavish. The description of it is it's more like noses pressed against the glass for the readership who want to know all about the fancy parties. The visiting Duke is considerably less impressive. He's kind of a rather dull man. He doesn't really talk very much, and he talks, when he does talk, he's very low, so people can't really hear. Around the dinner table, it's only the people seated immediately around him that hear anything, and those comments themselves seem rather uninspiring. It's not the eminent royal of the imagination. It's just a rather unexceptional bearded man who's sitting there mumbling. But in this scene, we also learn an awful lot about Ellen's background, Madame Olenska's, the Countess's background. She comes from a somewhat erratic childhood, I guess you could say. She moved around a lot. Her mother went through a series of husbands, had some financial difficulties, was constantly moving, always settling just a little bit lower in her station. And it was a very disorganized and somewhat chaotic childhood, which from the modern perspective, I think is actually even more censorious. The idea that a child would be sort of uprooted so often and refused to, or denied the ability to create bonds with any given society, to have friends. I think that's particularly resonant today, perhaps less so at the time. For that station, for that class, there was some fairly extended travel, and of course schooling wasn't necessarily a thing. The upper class could have like tutors who would follow them, and the travel itself was often considered quite the education, as it is, and legitimately. But it was a very uprooted existence, and there is a certain deliberately gypsy quality to this. We are told at one point that she possessed outlandish arts such as dancing a Spanish shawl dance and singing Neapolitan love songs to a guitar. These are all coded gypsy signifiers. This is the Spanish dance, Neapolitan, which is southern Italy. This is all kind of a dusky, earthy, specifically gypsy-ish life that she is leading, and culture that she is cultivating, an identity that is brewing in her. And with that, especially for that time and place, there is an association with a kind of suspect character, perhaps loose morals, a kind of sexuality, certainly a very exoticized existence. The gypsy has always had that sort of connotation in literature of the time. Going back to Esmeralda from the Notre Dame de Paris, the notion of somebody who is different, who is exotic, who is outside the standard moral codes of society. This is all very redolent for Newland Archer, who is getting, in chapter 8, his first extended conversation with her. They're in this lavish party, and she is sort of the belle of the ball, especially since the guest of honor himself is kind of a dullard. But she is very popular. She has lots of people coming up to her, and at a certain point, she gets up and crosses the room to go sit next to Newland Archer, which we are told she is not really supposed to do. The etiquette of the time would be that she is to remain stationary, and all of the men of the company who wish to come over and introduce themselves will do so, and that every man has to wait his turn. And under no circumstances is a woman supposed to exercise agency in this and go and walk over to somebody individually. But she does. She goes over and she sits next to him on the couch, and they have a little chat. And there is something very engaging about it. There is, perhaps for Newland, all this knowledge in the background and that certain sexual vibe going on there. But he also seems just intrigued with her personality, with her identity, with her freedom. She has some freedom within this. She does very audaciously cross a room to sit with him. And who doesn't really feel special when that happens? So there's all this going on, and you can see there is an intrigue. There is a kind of electricity building for Archer particularly, but honestly between the two of them. At one point, they're sitting there talking on the couch, and Archer sees other men who want to come over and say hello to him, and in fact, not just men, but even some of the women want to come over, because she has gotten the blessing of the Vanderladens. And so there are a lot of people who want to talk to her, and he suddenly feels a little awkward, like he is monopolizing her time. And so he says, "Oh," said Archer, "I have so many rivals. You see, she's already surrounded. The Duke being introduced." He's talking about the Duke is the guest of honor. Olenska responds, "Then stay with me a little longer," Madame Olenska said in a low tone, just touching his knee with her plumed fan. It was the lightest touch, but it thrilled him like a caress. Wow, there's a lot in there. There's a lot of power in that moment, that just light caress that you can read so much into it, so much buried desire, so much passion welling up, that just not even a light touch of a hand, but a fan, something their bodies never physically touch, but through some connection, so attenuated. There is an electric spark. There is something that thrills him. You can see him being stirred. You can see him being excited. You can see him being drawn to her. And this mysterious creature that is so different, so much more exotic than the pale, bled out society surrounding him, and that everything he is coming to expect. The contrast here, when he says he is looking at May Welland and thinking about, well, okay, that's my beloved, and they're talking about her, and May is Ellen's cousin, and they're both big fans of her and all of that, and they have a little conversation about, the limits of joy and the limits of love. And you can see him comparing May, who's a lovely girl, but so conventional and so much of that world, and the figure of Ellen, who is mysterious, sexual, thrilling. Chapter 8 closes with everybody gathering around, including Lawrence Lefferts and everybody who had rejected Ellen Olenska, now suddenly lining up like lemmings to have the honor of meeting this woman they had previously refused to meet, and now they're all just, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I want to meet her. She's lovely. She's such a great lady. Hypocrites, going back on what they had previously said. But through it all, Newland Archer is just watching, and he is recognizing that this is the cycle, the endless, relentless cycle of superficiality and hypocrisy and death that he sees playing out in this world day after day.